Proudly supported by Superior Engineering and Diesel Conversions Australia.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode. We are continuing work on the 4J today, and this morning what we're going to be working on is this front end right here. Now up front we've got all the coolers and everything that gets forced air through. So we've got obviously the radiator, we've got the transmission cooler, power steering cooler, and we have a front mount intercooler to go in. Now, as most of you guys know, my transmission is actually being rebuilt. Now, when you replace a transmission or rebuild it, you should really replace the cooler, because if there's any little metal particles or any fiber particles get stuck in the cooler, it means that that cooler is gonna get blocked and it's not gonna cool. So this morning we'll be ripping that out and replacing it with this Aeroflow cooler. Now this thing is just a bar and fin. It's the fattest and biggest one I could find to fit in this space. Don't actually have any fittings yet because I'm not sure if I'm gonna be using AN line or if I'm just gonna be using just normal barbs, but we'll figure that out later. We can at least get this thing mounted up today. Now, one thing that I'm very excited about is this thing here. This is a massive front mount intercooler from Adventure Corp. Now, this thing obviously goes up front, so we're gonna be mounting that as well. They've also sent me out some brackets. If you guys do want one of these, you can get them from Diesel Conversions Australia's website, and just look how bloody good that looks. This thing's gonna look sick up front. In order to support all that cooling stuff up front, we need some good fans. So these things are from Aeroflow, I've got two of them. They're 14-inch curved blade, reversible, and we're gonna be putting these onto our shroud, getting rid of the eBay ones. These are 1650 CFM, so they shit all over those eBay ones, and this will keep everything nice and cool. Right, that's the power steering cooler all disconnected, so we can get this out the way. I can just sit carefully down there. Now that's exposed our transmission cooler, so we'll get these lines off here, take this bracket off, see how we can mount the new one. The size of this isn't too bad. I've seen them a lot smaller on a lot of cars for trans coolers. This is actually a pretty big cooler for a factory one, so well done Nissan, but we're gonna upgrade it anyway. Right, so the cooler is in its sort of position. I just have to make a few brackets up. Now, one of the good things is we've got two threads down here. We've got two threads up here. Not sure how I'm gonna mount this last corner, but I'm pretty certain that 3 should be all right. We've got the fittings up the top, and that's just so I can route the hoses nice and neat down the side, because these are obviously gonna have to connect up onto them eventually. I think that looks pretty good there. So what I'm gonna do is try and whip up some bracketry. We actually haven't fired up the TIG at all for a project, so it might be a really good time to crack that TIG open and see if I can actually TIG. Righto, that is the bracket made. So we've just used the factory rubbers, drilled a big hole, slotted them in, so that's nice. I did have to notch this out because the frame actually kind of kicks out a bit, so we had to clearance that. But that should now just bolt up to the rad support there, and we can sit the cooler on top. Pretty easy little mount. I've also gone ahead and painted this because these are two dissimilar metals. So if you had raw metal touching raw metal, it'll actually start to rot out, but shouldn't have an issue now that it's painted. Right, so now this cooler, I'll actually get that bolted in, that way we can then start mocking up this top bracket. I think I'm only gonna get one side on that, but we'll see what it's like when it's all done. Now obviously that bottom bracket is taking most of the weight there, but we still do need to add one up the top. So I'm thinking that what we'll do is try and make a bracket off this thread here down to the top. The other side is gonna be a lot harder, so we'll get this one done first, then see if we can make one for the other side. Really only think it needs one, but it'd be nice to have both of them. Right, now I've got the top bracket sussed. I've cut 2 bits of aluminium and I need to stick them together like that. I need this to go up on an angle just to capture that thread that's already on the patrol. And in order to do that, I'm going to be TIG welding. Now, I have about an hour's experience with TIG welding, and it's just me stuffing around in the shed. So this probably isn't gonna go well. I bought this TIG welder for my birthday in July, and I really haven't had time to use it. So today's the day, we're gonna try it. Firstly, I'm gonna be practicing on a little bit of scrap, see if I can dial in the settings, if I can dial them in at all. Oh, metho.
Yeah, look, I've been at it for an hour. I think I'll just make the bracket out of steel because that is not very good. Right, Intercooler is now done. We've got our third bracket on the corner there. Now, I did just go ahead and cut this bracket here. It actually had a tab off to mount the old cooler on. Now, I've cut that off, and that is actually gonna add a heck of a lot more strength to that bracket because it ties it into the main support there. So now that that transmission cooler is mounted up, we're gonna be moving on to arguably one of the most exciting things that's going on in the car. Big front mount intercooler. So this thing is from Diesel Conversions Australia, and I've also got the bracketry here that they supply for a GU to mount it up. I'm gonna quickly chuck this on, and yeah, can't wait for this to be on the front because it's gonna look sick. Got to find some bolts to suit the bottom of this. All right, we're clashing with the power steering cooler pretty badly actually. So I might have to bend that out of the way. That looks sick. That looks so good. I've been waiting for that to go on for ages there. I don't know where this bottom bracket actually goes because it's a fair way off the rad support. So I'm just gonna quickly figure that out and I'll get back to you. Looks like this is gonna have to get bent somehow back in to give us some more clearance. I'm gonna have to try and push this in. Right, so I've managed to bend the brackets back and you can see there's bugger all clearance now, but that's basically what we've got to do to get the front mount in. So now I'm gonna have to try and make a little bracket to come off here just to house that other bracket because the distance isn't long enough under there. Right, so I've made this awesome looking bracket here, guys, with a bit of aluminium. Now that is actually just gonna space this up under here, just like that. We're gonna get our perfect clearance, but I'll show you guys in a sec. I just wanna quickly give you a snazzy little look at the bracky. Right, front mount is done. Strong as. That bracket come up good. I like it, it's nice and square. All right, the front mount is on. You can see my little bracket under there is nice and strong. So that thing ain't going anywhere, especially now that I just said that. So the piping for this is actually getting done from a fabricator. I'm not attempting to TIG ever again. Now I will practice, but we're not gonna do it on this. So what they do is they'll be taking the intercooler pipes up and around, and then we'll be going to the turbo on this side and inlet on that side. Basically all the fabrication work, including the exhaust, is getting done by King Fab Customs. We're just gonna leave it at this point now. But what I want to do quickly is put our new fans on. So this radiator here and the shroud and the fans are all from eBay. Heard good things about the rad. The shroud you can't really stuff up, but I've heard really bad things about these fans. So we're gonna get rid of them. And we're going to these Aeroflow ones. Now, these are 1350 CFM, if anyone's wondering, and they're 14 inch. So we'll bolt these on, wire them up to our Davies Craig controller, and this should keep the 4J nice and cool. Well, I'm just gonna lift this whole rad out so I can do it on the bench because that seems a lot easier. Try not to break anything. Oh. Now, unfortunately, in order to change these fans, the shroud has to come off because they are nut and bolted from the inside. So I'll quickly take this shroud off, swap them out, and then we can whack it back in. Use a pry bar on your radiator. Always gonna work out well. Love doing things 4 or 5 times, you know. Fit fans, take them off. Fit rubber, take it off. All right, fans are on, so I'm gonna whack this back in. Did actually have to drill 4 new holes because they didn't line up, but no big deal. Gonna whack it back in now. Just got one fan wired up just to make sure it's on suck and not blow. And it turns out it is on suck. Not bad, not bad. Pretty loud, actually. But they only turn on when the car's hot, so.
That'd be like equivalent to your normal fan that was there.
You're kidding. Here, you stick it on, I don't feel it. The red one goes to the plus. Oh, that's heaps.
Yeah, imagine 2.
Yeah, it's not holding it, but it's definitely sucking it.
You can see it.
Yeah?
Yeah, literally.
It's definitely sucking that in, look at that. Look at that. It's a lot of juice, man. Well, right, so that is pretty good. We've got our 2 new fans all fitted up, nice and snug, and you can see the pulling power on just one was actually holding a piece of paper on here. So that makes me pretty confident that the 2 of them running together is gonna keep everything nice and cool, especially our transmission with that new Aeroflow Intercooler. Right, it's actually the next day. We got the fans in the last clip. Now, I still do have to wire those up to the Davies Craig controller, but I kind of skipped that, and I've been talking to Diesel Conversions Australia about this front mount. Now, I did actually have the brackets around the wrong way, which is no surprise. I have no idea what I'm doing 50% of the time. So this top bracket here is actually designed to spin around, and the bottom one mounts to that bolt that I actually made that bracket for. So I definitely did get that wrong, but in saying that, it all fits up. I've test fitted the bull bar and everything clears. The only thing I'm gonna have to do is just ever so slightly notch that plate on the bull bar there, just to allow for the plumbing to come in. But God, it is nice to see this bull bar back on this car. It's been so long since it's been off. It's making me excited, guys. I'm bloody keen to get this build finished. Now, if you are wondering how to do this the right way, you do actually have to remove the AC fan and the power steering cooler, but I'm very happy to retain those two things. So I'm gonna mount it this way, notch the bull bar, that way we don't have to touch the factory stuff. Now the grill is up here. We may as well whack that on too and have a gander. About there, I'm not gonna pop it in properly. Oh, no, I'd have to. It was sitting there the other day. Come on, don't be like that. Maybe I'll just get a screwdriver. Oh, set of pliers, that'll do. See the intercooler just in there. You can't really see it through the grill, which is kind of disappointing. I actually eventually might cut that out, do some mesh like I used to have on the NP. But under there, you can see we're not even close to hitting that grill, which is epic. So we are gonna leave the intercooler in that exact spot. We're not gonna change anything. Now, unfortunately, that bar's gotta come back off just because it's much easier to work with that bull bar off. It's not too hard to do, so I'll quickly do that. Then we're gonna move on to mounting the fuel pump under the car. I actually can't believe how well that still works for putting it on and off this bull bar. It's adjustable height. All you gotta do, press the lever. You can adjust it up and down, and it just works perfectly for putting this on by myself. Is there another bolt? There is. This here is the Raceworks fuel pump that I got from Burson's. Now it's 14 PSI and about 500 litres per hour. That's what's recommended from DCA, so we're gonna whack this in. There is different brands in this black style pump. They all look the same. They're probably from the same place. Now that is gonna go hard up against the chassis like that. We're then gonna be cutting into the fat hard line that runs up the chassis to our fuel filter. And what we'll do is then put two barbs in and just run a bit of hose. We'll then double clamp it onto the part that it goes back onto the chassis, because there won't actually be a barb on that. But I've been assured that it works, so we're gonna be doing it that way. Then we've got to wire it up, run this to our fuse panel that we created last week. And yeah, then we'll have a fuel pump. It's another job done. Well, under the car, doing bloody nothing, as per usual. All right, we're under the patrol, and the fuel line runs right along the side of the chassis on the driver's side here. Now we need to cut into this fat pipe here, because that is our main supply to the fuel filter, and then obviously to the 4J. So I'm actually hoping to mount the fuel pump right about here. Now it's a good spot because it's going to be protected from the cross member, which is over here. And it's also going to be protected from here, and we've got the slider here as well. So I'm going to drill these out, and then I'm going to tap a thread and just see how strong it feels. A bit of lube always helps a shaft to go into a hole. If you've never tapped a hole before, you basically just want to get it really straight and spin it in, and if it binds up, if it feels like it's getting too tight, you go back and forth, wind it out a bit, then wind it back in. That's both those holes tapped. So I'm going to cut the fuel line, which is this big one here. So I'm probably going to cut it pretty far away just so it stops the hoses kinking, because you don't really want a tight radius getting up there. So I'm hoping to cut it with these cutters here, because I don't really want to grind it because it's got diesel in it. And I'm hoping these don't squash it too much. They're a little bit blunt. So we'll try this, and if it doesn't work, I'll just have to get the grinder out. Instead of these circlip pliers that go outwards when you squeeze in, you can actually just round off and create the smallest lip for the hose clamp to bite on. If I just put it in and wriggle it left and right like that, it actually just flexes the end of it out. That way you get like a nice little barb sort of fitting. Right, so I've got these brass barbs here that are gonna go in each side of the pump. So we'll get that fitted up and whack it under the car. All right, while I'm at it, I'm gonna fit a waterproof connector. You could use Deutsch plugs, you could use lots of things really, but I just got cheap plugs off eBay. When I'm doing crimp connectors, I actually just put the crimp into the pliers first. That way then you can actually just slide this in
crimp it up. Always got to put conduit on any live wires that are going into a car, just in case they short out. Right, now that is ready to go under the car, so we'll bolt it up. Last of these clamps done up on the fuel pump. Now we've got some pre-fuel. Righty-o, that is the fuel pump all mounted up, bloody strong. Now I was originally going to flip it and have the in on this side, but to get the hose to do a little S like that was not going to work. You could put a 90 in there and have it come up and across, and that would work great, but I decided just to flip it around and loop my hoses around like that. I think that looks really nice anyway. Eventually I will build a bash plate up under here. Downside to a bash plate is it catches all the stuff, so you want a bit of clearance on the bottom so you can hose it out. But for now, this will do until we go serious off-roading. Right, made the lead, so I'm just gonna feed it down the side of the car. Now, got to take into account that this is now the hot side of the car. So the exhaust is basically running right beside this wire. So we're gonna kind of try and hide it to the best of our ability. One thing to really make sure about is that your colors line up on your plug. So I'm doing black to white and orange to red. Fuel pump is all wired up. All I have to do is whack a fuse in. I'm just going to be putting in a 15 amp, which is blue, and it goes right here. Once again, I am writing it all onto this cover just so I know what's what, and I'll properly do it at the end of the build. That can go back on. Right, now I actually want to go ahead and test the fuel pump while we're at it. So I'm going to get the keys. I'm going to cycle the ignition on and off. It's very important to do this because you don't want to start up and then have a leak. Even though it's diesel, still don't really want it. All right, fingers crossed, guys. Let's hope this bloody works. Oh yeah. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's definitely working. It's a little bit hard by yourself, but that got really loud. Hoping it really does not stay that loud. That would suck. Right, it's working. I can't see any leaks, but it is really, really, really loud. I don't know if you guys can hear this. Ready? That is proper loud. And we've got a fuel leak. I seen a fuel leak. All right, looks like it's from the filter, but I don't know where. Maybe underneath. Yeah. All right, filter, I've got to fix this leak and then I'll get back to you. Right, I've fixed the leak, but I don't know if you guys can hear. This thing is loud as. Not very happy with the noise of that. I'm gonna have to try and maybe figure out a different pump. I know you can put an in-tank pump in, which is a pretty good idea, I think. Might just have to do that and then put a regulator on to get it down to 14 PSI, because that is ridiculously loud. I really can't stand that. All right, 1 week later, guys. Last weekend, I bailed out on that fuel pump because it was ridiculously loud. Went inside, done a few posts on Facebook, and also contacted the guys at DCA. Everyone has said to mount it on rubbers. Now, why didn't I do that in the first place? Well, I just didn't think about it, but we're here today with some rubbers. Now, these are an engine mount style rubber. You can get these at Bunnings. So I'm gonna whack these on. That's gonna stop it vibrating up the chassis, and hopefully it's gonna quieten this fuel pump up, because I'd really like to leave it. We've already cut into the hard lines. I really just don't wanna get another pump. Right, the pump is mounted on the rubbers. So I'm gonna plug in the battery again. Right, that made the biggest difference. You can actually barely even hear it. It's under there. It's just spinning away. And I imagine that it's gonna get a lot quieter once this is running as well. With the exhaust setup that I'm going, you won't really hear this at all. So that is perfect. I thought we were on a losing streak then, but we are on a winning streak. The good thing about that is we do not have to change fuel pumps. I am sorry for getting angry fuel pump. I'll never do it again. I'll never not mount fuel pumps to rubbers again. All right, so that is perfect. I'm gonna move on to the next job. Now, I really want to modify this bracket here. Now, this is actually holding a vacuum solenoid, and it looks like a boost solenoid as well. So what we want to do is make this not so ugly. So I'm going to try and modify it, because this actually sits up on top of the motor. I'm thinking about just basically cutting it up with the grinder, tack welding it back on. Just taking the sensors off so I don't melt them with the welder and with the grinder. Probably just start hacking this thing up and just see how it goes. Don't really have a plan yet. There's nothing special about this bracket, but at least it doesn't look huge like the other one. Actually, I'm gonna paint that black too because that just looks crap. I'll just quickly give it a flick. Oh, what would I do without black spray paint? This thing would look so bad. Definitely not the best bracket I've ever made, but the other one came right out here and then had a stud on top and it sat up a lot higher, but you can kind of hardly tell that that's in there now. So bang on for that one. Let's move on to the most exciting part about this build, the turbo and the exhaust setup. Now right here we have a BRD exhaust manifold. Now this thing is made out of steel. Stainless steel is prone to cracking, so we've chosen steel for this build, and beside it is a 44mm turbo from DCA. So this turbo here is a 44mm turbo. It's from KSI Racing and it's actually through Diesel Conversions Australia. This comes with the kit that is purchased for my car. So you actually get this 44mm turbo in the kit. Now I was originally going to use that, but I think that we're gonna need a bigger turbo. Now this is a 44mm. I wanna be stepping up into an F55, which is actually a 48mm. And what it's gonna do for us is it's gonna be a lot more efficient power. It's also going to bring the power in later, which is a lot better for the crank on a Ford JJ1. Now, a lot of you probably seen this dirty old log standard manifold hanging off the side of it. And I was actually going to use this just for budget restraints. We are quickly running out of money on this thing, but I can't let the boys down. I've got to go something cool on this build, and what's cooler than an equal length manifold from BRD. Now I got this thing through Modified Explorer. He is also going to be supplying the turbo if we can fit it, but what we need to do today is fit this manifold onto the side of the motor. Then we're going to fit up this KSI Racing turbo. We're going to take some photos, take some measurements, send them off to him. He's going to see if we can fit an F55 onto this Patrol. Now let's fit this manifold up. We've got two studs here that we're going to have to change out the bolts or smaller studs. But that goes on pretty easy like that. God, that looks good just like that. Love it. So much better than that rusty old bloody thing that we had on there. Holy crap, guys. How much better does that look than that rusty standard manifold that we had on there? Changes the whole look of this engine bay just with that one manifold. Now the reason we've gone steel over stainless steel is more prone to cracking, especially with the heat that we're going to be putting through this thing and the vibrations. Now even though we're only stepping up from a 44 to a 48mm wheel, the physical size of an F55 is a lot bigger than a 44. So we're going to mount this up. We need to take measurements. It's going to be pretty close fit, I think. So I'm hoping that we can fit the 55. If not, we're going to run this 44 and it's going to be more than enough. But I just think it would be cool to have a nice big snail sitting on the front of this motor. I'll quickly whack a bolt in. Not going to get carried away. We're not fitting it up because if I am going the 55, I'm going to be sending this one back. So we're not going to be marking this or anything. We're just putting one bolt in it, take some measurements, see how it fits in the engine bay. And I'm very excited to see a turbo on this thing. Now, this turbo isn't going to be clocked right. As you can see, the outlet of the turbo is hitting our breather there already, but I just want to get it sitting on there just so I can see where we're at with room. Holy crap, look at the bloody room we've got. That's surprising. Now this gate over here is pretty close, but I think that we're going to have room for a 55. I mean, that 44 even looks good. Imagine what a 55 is going to look like. The front housing on the F55 is definitely a lot bigger than that. So it's going to look insane if we can get a 55 on there. I'll take some measurements off camera, take some photos, send them off to the boys at Modified Explorer, see if I can fit the F55 on, and if we can, I'm going to order one and then we'll whack it on in probably the next video. Got a lot more room there now for a dump pipe compared to the standard manifold, but we don't have the transmission in yet and we don't have our front drive shaft in yet, which is both sort of in the way of our dump pipe and exhaust. So be curious to see how much room we have with everything back in. But the turbo placement on this manifold is definitely a lot better than the standard one. But for now, we can look at this thing for a little bit because that just looks amazing. Front mount intercooler, the turbo, everything that we've done so far just looks so good. And actually through the week, I have actually been messing around with the wiring. I've managed to tuck it up a lot neater, and I used a P-clip right there to secure it to the firewall. So our wiring harness is tucked away really nicely compared to what it was before. See, it just comes up over the back and down. Even though it doesn't look sorted here, I have sorted out a lot. I've put a plug on everything that didn't have a plug on it before. So now this wiring harness is completely disconnectable so that if I do pull the motor at any stage, we come over here, we disconnect. I think I put 3 or 4 plugs in. We take this fuse out and we basically can lift the motor out with the wiring harness still on the motor. Now, today's episode was filmed and is going to be edited very different. So let me know what you think about this sort of style, or if you want me to go back to the old ways, I could do that too. We got a turbo on the 4J, very exciting stuff. And hopefully we can fit that F55, but if not, we'll be running this DCA turbo. I'm really looking forward to getting this thing on the road, getting out to a few shows and stuff, show it off to you guys, let you come around, see it in person. I think that would be really cool to do. Now, I am going to be putting these hats on sale. I've been wearing it all day, Roam Life hat. There's 2 different styles, there's a deep dish and a shallow dish, but check the website if you want one of them. I'm gonna do them a little bit cheaper, and I'll also throw in a free Roam Life sticker with every purchase. So if you're keen to get a hat, definitely check the website. But yeah, I'm going inside. I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Bye.